Chapter 3. Celery and Slugs. Cato grew up in an orphanage called Nightsong Haven, which was located on the outskirts of the war-torn city of Moonshield. The orphanage gained infamy as an asylum for children who had been orphaned due to a realm-wide conflict the chroniclers later dubbed the Great War, which saw 6 of the 7 sovereign nations of Aden get entangled in an 8-year-long collision. Many family trees across the realm had been uprooted by the conflict, highborn and lowborn alike. It didn't matter whether they supported the war or opposed it. No one escaped the suffering. Ultimately, it had been estimated that the Great War reduced Aden's population by 1/10. The history books would say that the Western alliance of Onira, Aspera and Moralis had triumphed over the invading horde of Ludor, Raconia and Kyogun. The orphans of Nightsong Haven, however, had never once felt they were the victors of war. Instead of being sympathized for the cruel twist of fate that saw them losing their families, the children of Moonshield were vilified by the masses. Everywhere they went, the orphans were met with faces of disdain. They were a constant reminder of the blood that had been shed in the past, the unignorable scars of the wound that was left behind by the Great War. Most orphans were part of a family before they ended up in an orphanage, but Cato had known no other home than Nightsong Haven. He was discarded by his parents before his first conscious thought had even formed. Some orphans still held on tightly to their family name in a desperate attempt to preserve their former identity, but Cato had always been of Moonshield. He didn't belong there. He just knew that to be true. Somewhere buried deep inside, he had always felt that life held a bigger purpose for him. He wasn't meant to be left rotten in an orphanage, only to be picked apart by the vultures of the streets afterward. He understood that in order to make his life actually worth living, he must leave Nightsong Haven and start anew. A life in the shadows of society simply wasn't enough. He wanted more. He wanted to bask in the glory of the sun, just as Ava, the holy goddess, had intended for all her children. Back then, terms like destiny and fate were just hollow words without meaning, devised exclusively for the elite to make their own lives seem more significant. No, he didn't believe in fate. Destinies weren't for the likes of him. He needed something more than that to catalyze his ascension up the social ladder, something that had been lacking since birth and separated him from any other 12-year-old who happened to be born into nobility. He needed luck, just one gentle push into the right direction from Ava herself. Every night he would close his eyes, hoping and praying that the holy goddess would finally take notice of his pleas. And then, everything changed when a stranger showed up at the orphanage one day. At first sight, the stranger looked like any other ordinary old man. He was clothed in a sober grey robe and walked with a wooden cane, even though he didn't seem to need it for support. His hair was long, thin and white, like the web of a spider dancing in the wind as he walked. His eyes were a brilliant blue that radiated a gentle warmth, similar to sapphire stones held against the morning sun. The stranger walked into the hall alongside Matron Taya, the matriarch of Nightsong Haven, just as the orphans were gathered for dinner. They were having a conversation, though it seemed rather one-sided. The stern matron did all of the talking while the visiting stranger simply smiled back, nodding a few times to appear engaged. They stopped right where Cato was sitting, and their conversation promptly came to a halt. Cato never even noticed their presence behind him. He was stirring his spoon in a bowl of soup and watching with mild fascination how the chopped-up pieces of celery spun around in the vortex he created.
"This is the one, my lord,"
Matron Taya said, and let out a deflating sigh. But whether it was a sigh out of relief or one out of reluctance, the stranger couldn't tell. He simply chuckled and replied with a courteous nod.
"Cato, get up from your seat and give Lord Aemon a proper greeting."
The matron sounded tired, and even seemed to be a bit anxious, most likely because she could never predict Cato's erratic behaviour. The two occasionally clashed with each other over the most trivial things. The last few days had been especially challenging for her. Surely she was hoping the young orphan wouldn't embarrass her in front of the noble lord. But when Cato decided to ignore her request, she turned crimson red and bit down on her teeth, She was certain her words had reached his ears. Cato kept stirring his soup undisturbed. He was staring at the ceramic bowl without any intention of getting even a single drop of the disgusting meal down his throat. He only knew two evils in his life: celery and slugs. Running barefoot at night through a damp, grassy field that was covered with slugs, and feeling their slimy innards explode against the soles of his feet, had traumatized him for life when he was only 8. The sensation was so vividly ingrained into the core of his being, he could still feel the cold, viscous fluids pop against his feet whenever he thought about it. So his hatred for slugs might have been justified, but his disdain for celery was a bit more abstract. Not even he himself could fully understand where it truly came from. He philosophized the purpose of the vegetable, but sensed that the hall had gradually dwindled into silence. All eyes were on him when he finally raised his head. Only then did he realize the fuming matron behind his back.
Young man, you might just have chosen the most inopportune moment to demonstrate your demon's trait.
Her voice was sharp and cold like the edge of a blade. There was no question that Taya Nightsong was a selfless woman with a heart of gold. She founded the orphanage with the purpose of giving even the tiniest shred of hope to the utterly hopeless. But there was also no question that some orphans were simply easier to handle than others. On a good day, she would have the patience to withstand a full army of rebellious orphans. However, she clearly didn't wake up that morning blessed with any such patience.
I will not repeat myself, Cato. Do you have any idea who this man is? Now get up and do as you're told.
Oh, fuck! You're in trouble now, Kay!
Deacon, one of Cato's friends, shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, riling up the rest of the hall.
Uh-oh! Time to scrub the shithouse again, Cato Potato!
Armin, another one of Cato's friends, yelled from the other side of the table.
That's enough out of you two!
Odissa, who Cato regarded as a bit more special than his other friends, yelled at Armin and Deacon. She gave Cato a kick under the table and prompted him for a reaction before Matron Taya really did make him clean the outhouse again. Cato slowly rose from his seat, straightened his back, and held his head up high. Everyone who was hoping to see one of his infamous tantrums murmured to each other with visible disappointment. He glanced at Armin and Deacon with a snarl. He turned to Odissa and sent her a wink. His eyes lowered to the silver pendant around her neck. He was proud to see the present he had given her for her 14th birthday over a week ago.
Well?
Matron Taya said with her arms folded. She gave Armin and Deacon a scowl, telling them that if one more expletive flew out of their mouths, they would be the ones cleaning the outhouse instead. Cato turned to the matron and smiled his most obedient smile. It was immediately answered with the rise of an eyebrow, but he couldn't blame her for the apprehension. He knew he had been making her life more difficult than she deserved. His eyes, however, promised her that he would be on his best behavior. He then turned to the stranger. The old man looked back at him with a peculiar smile that immediately made him feel oddly endeared. It threw him off guard for a moment, but the sight of an increasingly agitated matron from the corner of his eye made him recompose himself. If the stranger was a lord, then he would show everyone in the hall the proper way to receive a noble guest. Without effort, he made a deep bow as if he had been trained for years to do so.
It is with great pleasure that I welcome you to Night Song Haven, my noble lord. I hope that everything has been to your liking so far. My name is Cato, and it is an honor to make your acquaintance. Perhaps my lord would like to join in on the delicious soup that our matriarch has cooked with all her love and dedication.
Ignoring the unrest in the hall, the old man hunkered down with surprising agility and looked up to meet the young orphan's amber eyes. He held the stare for a moment as if he were studying a mystic relic, but the warmth from his smile never wavered.
How do you do, young Cato? My name is Eamon, and please believe me when I say that the pleasure is, in fact, all mine. I have travelled a long way to find you and hope to become your friend,
he said, and extended his hand.
Oh, and thank you for your kind offer, but I regret to say that I don't get along very well with Celery.
Cato was taken aback by the visitor's friendly greeting. He had never been on the receiving end of such courtesy from any stranger before, let alone a noble lord. He blushed and flashed a grin before accepting the old man's hand. The river of Cato's destiny finally began to flow that day. Less than a week after the old man had paid him a visit, Matron Taya told him that he had been acquired by the wealthy patron. She purposefully avoided using the word adopt, which meant that he wasn't going to be part of Lord Amon's family. The practice of purchasing orphans to use as servants wasn't uncommon among the upper echelon of society, but it did strike him as odd that he seemed to have been targeted so specifically. Regardless, he grabbed the opportunity with both hands. It didn't matter if there would be a lifetime of servitude ahead of him. At least he was shown a direction he could swim toward. Anything would be better than to remain in the stagnant waters of Nightsong Haven. The only thing that did make him hesitate was the fact that he would be leaving his friends behind. With the cynical view he held of the world, he was sure that life wasn't going to be any kinder to them. However, he made a promise to himself that if Ava continued to smile on him, he would one day return and share his fortunes with them. He left Nightsong Haven early in the morning, before the rest of the orphanage had awoken. It was better that way. Goodbyes never did fare well with him. Only Matron Taya was there to send him off, and despite their frequent collisions, his departure was difficult for both sides. Taya Nightsong was the closest thing he had to a mother, and he was sure that he was something like a son to her as well. Her final hug seemed to be filled with emotions at the very least. He wanted to say that he loved her, but wasn't able to force the words out of his mouth. He hated himself for it, but argued that perhaps some things were better left unsaid. So he broke off the embrace, turned his back to Nightsong Haven, and entered the horse carriage to ride off into the great unknown.